friends at home. In this video, I will be doing today's math lesson with you. And this week, we are starting a new chapter. And we are actually starting a new section of math. Some people love it. Some people despise it. Some people find it very easy. It is called geometry. Can you all say that word? Geometry. So friends here in the classroom, you can go home today and tell your parents, guess what I did in school today? I did geometry. And friends sitting at home watching this video, when you are finished watching, you can go to your parents and say, I did geometry today. And your parents will say, what? And you'll say, I know, I'm so smart. I do geometry. Geometry is a type of math that uses shapes and numbers. And so we're going to be talking about two-dimensional shapes today. And the reason why we're doing 13.1 and 13.2 is because two-dimensional shapes, for the most part, is pretty much a review for most of us. I have a son at home who will be 2 next month, and he knows many of his shapes already, and he's not even 2. So I believe in my heart that many of you know a lot of these shapes. So we're going to go over what a two-dimensional shape is, and then we'll talk about some of the characteristics or attributes of two-dimensional shapes. And we'll do all that today, so then tomorrow we can start doing fun things where we're taking shapes and manipulating them and changing them into different shapes and things like that. So I am on 13.1, which begins on page 483, and it says here two-dimensional shapes. Now, it says some shapes are two-dimensional. And I think it's important before we even get into 2D, 3D, and all of that, that we understand what that means to say something is two-dimensional, okay? So I'm going to pull out my handy-dandy whiteboard here, and I'm going to erase the language arts that we were doing on it earlier today. And I'm going to show you what we mean by two dimensions, why we call them 2D or two-dimensional, and we'll go from there. So you've probably heard of 2D shapes and 3D shapes, yes? Give me 1 second. So I have two-dimensional, which sometimes we write as 2D, and I have three-dimensional, which sometimes we call 3D. And I'm sure you've heard of 2D and 3D, but maybe you don't know what it means, and I think it's important to understand what it means, because then it makes it make a lot more sense when we're using them in geometry, okay? So to understand what two-dimensional means, first thing we need to know is what is a dimension? So we have this word dimension, D-I-M-E-N-S-I-O-N. Everyone say dimension. Dimension is a big, giant, fancy word, which basically means measurement. Okay? So we can measure it, and if it has 2 dimensions, we can measure it 2 ways. If it has 3 dimensions, we can measure it 3 ways. Sorry. So let me give you an example. If I were to draw a flat shape, like a square, the 2 ways I can measure this, the 2 dimensions, I can measure how tall it is from top to bottom, and I can measure how wide it is from side to side. So width or length and height. So length, it has length and it has height or width, okay? Those are 2 dimensions. 2 measurements. A 3D shape, okay, if I were to say, let's take a cube, for example, and bear with my drawing here. It's not going to be the, okay. A 3D shape is one that I can pick up. It pops off the page. It's a solid shape that I can hold on to. I can measure how tall it is. That's 1 dimension. I can measure how wide it is. That's 2 dimensions. But I can also measure how deep it is. It has depth. So that's the 3rd dimension. So those are 3D shapes. Today we're talking about 2D shapes. They just have 2 dimensions, height and width, or width and length. A triangle. How tall is it? How wide is it? A circle. How tall is it? How wide is it? All of those shapes that are flat on your paper have 2 measurements or 2 dimensions. They're 2-dimensional shapes. And so that's what we're talking about today. They are flat. They have no thickness. We're not measuring how deep they are because they don't have depth. They're flat on the paper. Okay? The shape has sides that can be measured. 1, 2. A closed shape. Think about a closed door. A closed shape has all connected lines. See how all these lines are connected? If that was a room, you would need a door to get in. Do you see that? An open shape has lines missing. See how these have lines missing? So I could walk into this room with no problem. I could walk into this room with no problem. So that's pretty easy. Closed, you can't get in. Open, there's a side that's open. Okay? The closed shapes have sides that are straight lines. And we call those the sides. And they also have corners where the lines meet. And we call those corners, each one is called a vertex. And when you have more than one, like this has 1 vertex, 2 vertex, 3 vertex, we call them vertices or vertexes. Okay? So a triangle has 1, 2, 3 vertexes or vertices. How many does a square have? How many corners does a square have? Beckett? 4. Okay? So those are just some things to know about 2D shapes. So go ahead and turn the page now. This is going to feel easy to you because it is. It says trace the shape. So everyone right now trace your triangle from vertex to vertex. There are 1, 2, 3 sides. Do you see 1, 2, 3 sides? And there are 1, 2, 3 corners or vertices. So go ahead and write 3 sides, 3 vertices, or 3 corners. Now, number 2, trace that shape. What is that shape, Emily?
Square.
It's a square. How many sides does our square have? 1, yeah, 2, 3, 4. So we can put a 4 there, 4 sides. How many corners does it have, Noah? Or vertices? How many? I wish you would pay attention. Yes, 4. Good job. 4 corners or vertices. All right, our next shape, Isaac. Number 3, let's trace it. Can you tell us what this shape is? What is that shape called, Isaac? A rectangle. And how many sides does that rectangle have? 4 sides. And Connor, how many corners or vertices does that rectangle have? 4. Thank you. All right, so now our word problem down here says Jan draws a shape. Her shape has 3 sides and 3 corners. Does Jan draw a closed or an open shape? You can draw a picture to help. So I'm going to draw a shape. Here's 1 side, 2 sides, 3 sides, and it has 1, 2, 3 corners. Is it closed or open? Oh, you guys, can you see that in the back? Is that a closed or an open shape, Johnny?
Open.
Closed. And what shape is it, Victoria? Yeah, it's a triangle. Victoria, why don't you bring your book right up here to the carpet so you can see better, okay? Just bring your whole book and pencil. All right, Mason says you can tell if a shape is closed by looking at its size and color. Do you agree?
No.
Why not? You're right, but why don't you agree? I don't agree either, Austin. Why not?
Well, because it's all about like does it have an open or closed?
It's about the lines, right? It's not about the size or color. Good job. All right, go ahead now. now, go to the top of the next page. Again, we're just reviewing. These are our closed shapes. These are our open shapes. Remember that the sides are the flat sides and the corners are called vertexes or vertices. It says for number 1, 2, 3, and 4, it says color the closed shapes. So the first one they colored because it was closed. Is number 2 a closed shape?
No.
Should we color it?
No.
No. Is number 3 a closed shape?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's color it. And you can do a quick math color, kind of like they did. Where you just kind of shade it in like this. It doesn't have to be your best coloring. Just enough that whoever's checking your paper would know that it was colored. Mateo, number 4, is that open or closed?
Closed.
Closed, so give it a color. And again, you can do a real quick shade in with your pencil. You don't have to make it your best coloring in the world. And once you're done doing that, go ahead and turn the page. We're doing the same thing here that we did on the other side. So for this one, go ahead and trace 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 corners. The rectangle has 4 sides and 4 corners. Number 2, I told you it was easy. That's why we're doing 2 lessons today. For number 2, trace the shape. What shape is that, Drew?
Rectangle.
A rectangle. And how many sides does it have?
4.
4. And how many corners or vertices does it have?
4.
4. Good job. Connor, number 3, go ahead and trace it and tell us what shape is that?
A rectangle.
Number 3?
Yes.
That's not a rectangle.
Wait. Mama,
I'm on page 486, number 3.
Oh, I mean triangle.
Triangle. So I have how many sides?
3.
3. And then it says put a dot at each corner or vertex. How many vertices do I have?
How many vertices?
3 also. Good job. All right. It says Tim and Al draw closed shapes. Jack draws an open shape. Tim's shape has the most sides. What shape does each child draw? All right. So we got to figure this out. We got to use the clues. So Tim and Al draw closed. So these are Tim and Al's. Jack draws an open shape. So which one is Jack's? Lily? The top one. So everybody on the top line, we can write Jack because we know he drew an open shape. And that's an open shape. So that one's Jack's. So now we need to solve for Tim and Al. And it says Tim's shape has the most sides. So which one of those has the most sides, Sage? The bottom. So the bottom one is Tim's. And that leaves Al for the middle one. So you should have Jack, Al, and Tim. This one we're not going to write, but we will talk about. It says, how are these shapes the same and how are they different? Well, they're the same because they all have 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're different because these two are closed and this one is open. They're also different because this one is a rectangle. It has 2 sides longer, and this one is a square. All the sides are the same, okay? All right, let's go on now to lesson 13-2. We're talking about attributes, or attributes is a fancy way of saying the details about two-dimensional shapes. So Tammy draws a small closed shape. Her small closed shape has 6 sides and 6 corners. What shape does she draw? So here's our choices. Which one of her shapes has 6 sides and 6 corners? There's only 4 people raising their hand. I should see all your hands up. Landon? The hexagon. Good job. Some closed shapes have sides and corners. A circle does not have sides or corners. Right? Size, color, and position do not matter when you're naming a shape. Doesn't matter how big it is. Doesn't matter what color it is. Doesn't matter where it is. What's important is how many sides and how many corners. That's what determines a shape, okay? All right, so turn the page here. And we're doing the color in each closed shape. So number 1, they colored for us. Jacob, number 2, is that open or closed? Open? Show me the opening. Closed? How do you know it's closed? There's no doorway. There's no way in, right? It's closed. So let's shade it in, everybody. All right, number 3. Austin, is that open or closed?
Open.
Yeah, it's got a doorway here, so we don't color that one. Ava June, number 4. Open or closed?
Close.
Yeah, it's like a room with no door. Shade that one in. We shade our closed shapes. And number 5, Sage, it says Sally draws a shape that does not have corners. Beth draws a shape with 3 sides. Which closed shape should each child draw? So Sally has no corners. So which one is hers? The circle. So on this line next to the circle, write Sally. And Beth draws a shape with 3 sides. So Emily, which one is Beth's shape? The triangle. I know, this is an easy chapter. I told you guys that. That's why we're doing 2 and 1. All right, number 6 says Corey draws 2 shapes and says they are the same. Is he correct? Yeah, how do you know? Because they both have what, Lily? They both have 3 corners and 3 sides. So yes, he is correct. They are the same. Good job. All right, top of the next page. This is just a review. So let's look down here. More practice on your own right now. Take a quick minute and go through. Color all the closed shapes. Okay? Take a minute. I'll do the same. And then you can look at mine to check your work. If they're open, leave them alone. If they're closed, shade them in. And again, because it's math, I'm not looking for perfect coloring. I'm just looking that you understand the concept. So you should have number 2, 3, 5, and 8 shaded. 4, 6, and 7 you should have left alone because those are open. Everybody have that? Yeah. All right, go ahead and turn the page. We're on 490. It's the last page we're doing today. Johnny, for number 1, we trace the shape. 1, 2, 3, 4. It has 4 sides. We put dots on the corners. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 corners. Isaac, number 2, trace it. How many sides does it have?
0.
Oh, it has 0. Good job. What about corners?
0.
0. Good job. Camila, that last shape, number 3. How many sides does it have? 4 sides. How many corners? 4. Excellent. That shape is called a rhombus. Sometimes people call that a diamond. It's called a rhombus, okay? All right, let's look here at Andy, Matt, and Fred. The first one says Andy draws an open shape. So, Austin, which one is Andy's? The second one. So on the second line, write Andy because Andy drew an open shape. It said Matt and Fred draw closed shapes. Matt's shape has more sides than a square. So which one is Matt's? Drew? The first one, the hexagon, right? So put Matt on that line. And that leaves Fred for the bottom line. Fred drew the circle.
Hey, my dad's name is Fred.
Yeah. All right, ready? Number 5. What makes these 2 shapes the same? One's red, one's blue, so that's not the same. One's big, one's little, so that's not the same. What makes them the same, Beckett? Yep, they both have 6 sides and 6 corners. They are both hexagons. All right, friends, I told you today would be an easy lesson. I hope you friends at home thought so as well. I will see you again later. Bye, friends.
Bye.